the Democratic and Republican national conventions have now come and gone, while media coverage is swarming with images of protest turned violent, what impact as the conventions, are these conventions, what if they had on the presidential race? I've got David Lamb, one of the best people in the business, to tell us that. David, I'm looking at the Trump show, otherwise known as Republican National Convention. It's in the books. Democratic Convention in the books. We've talked about that already. Did the president get any sort of bump from that show?
Neither candidate actually got very much of a bump in this. I've got a Morning Consult poll taken after the Republican National Convention. So now both conventions are in the book. There's just been a little bit of a movement in the president's direction. What I would warn against, Pat, at this point, a couple of months out, is paying attention to these national polls, the discussion points. What are the messages that the debates and the discussions are framed around, and who do those who gains the advantage there? You were talking earlier about the Nixon land. I would advise our viewers to go back 6 weeks whenever you called this playbook. It's the Law and Order playbook. You predicted it a couple of months ago. It is in action right now. That is what is happening. If there were a drinking game, every time Trump said law and order, we would all be hammered.
Well, look at his ads. Rick Perlstein, the reason I think Nixon land, and the people that attack this idea, they need to read the book before they attack the idea. Yeah. But Richard Perlstein's brilliant. And he wrote this book and he said, look, what happens when you take chaos? When you take chaos and you make it work for your talking points. There's nobody better than Karl Rove.
Right.
He learned under Lee Atwater. Right. Lee Atwater learned under Donald Segretti. These are all Nixon people. And they know how to take things like Kenosha and Portland and Seattle and Chicago and New York and Antifa. They know how to take all that and turn it into something that scares the bejesus out of people. Are polls showing that that's probably taking place?
Polls are showing movement in terms of the suburban voters this election. Everyone's going after those undecided, more independent, more moderate, if you will, suburban voters. That's where folks are going. Trump got them in 2016. There's a battle for them today. What are those suburban voters? What's causing that movement? As the discussion switches and kind of pivots from the coronavirus to your safety, to law and order, to justice, and the protests are framed more as anarchist. And the violence and the fires and the looting.
It didn't start out like that.
It didn't.
And now where is it? How is that regarded? The looters, they're not called protesters anymore. Right. They're called rioters.
Yeah.
The stories are people shooting. I saw a headline today where they talk about the police officer who was shot in the back of the head by a protester. Right. That was a rioter. Right. Died. Yeah. And so they're seeing these kinds of stories every day, and the numbers, you believe, are tapping into that.
They are. There is movement there. Trump is seen as more decisive and more of a stronger leader in that sense. Biden is seen as weak. The basement strategy is coming back to bite him because it seems as though he's either, and this is the view with many of the voters, he's either avoiding Trump or he's avoiding the controversy and calling out and being a decisive leader. The president of the United States has to be. Whenever the discussion is on law and order, on rioting and looting, Trump wins.
You're talking about the polls.
The polls. Okay. Trump wins. It's leaning that way. Just pay attention to what the national debate is. If the national debate is on the coronavirus, Trump loses. But you notice in the Republican National Convention, there wasn't a great deal even said about the coronavirus.